seems like that beginning scene in Scrooge with Lee Majors and Santa really made an impression on somebody. Fatman Na is brought to us by directors Esham and Ian Nelm and stars Mel Gibson as Santa and Walton Goggins as the hitman who wants to murder him. When a young boy, played by Chance Hurstfield, gets coal on Christmas Day instead of what he wanted, he contracts Walton Goggins' hitman to take out Santa Claus. And while all this is going on, Santa has fallen on hard times. There's a lot more bad kids that don't deserve presents out there now, so his factory's not having to make as many. So apparently, since they're not making as many toys, they're not meeting a quota, so they're not getting paid as much. So he's having to take on other contracts with the factory so that they can make ends meet. So what we end up with is Santa Claus, the elves, the United States military, and the most badass hitman assassin known to man battling out to see who the last man standing is. Fatman is a weird fucking movie. And I don't mean weird just because of its premise. Yes, the premise is pretty out there and weird. You have like a realistic, I guess, take on Santa Claus and all the things he does, and some kid that gets pissed off because the kid's just a little fucktard shit and doesn't deserve what he asked for, so he gets coal. So he contracts someone to go fucking murder Santa Claus. That is all weird enough. But it's not just that. That's not the weirdest part of the movie. The weirdest part of the movie is the way that it all plays out. The way that this movie is structured. You would think that this movie would be classified as a comedy given that synopsis. And it definitely has funny parts. It's never like slapstick goofy funny either. It's all absurd comedy. It's very dry humor. And I can appreciate dry humor. I do like dry humor. But here, they take this shit like really serious in this movie. It's played 100% straight. Never once is it played for laughs or as like a goofy premise. And while playing a goofy premise straight can really work to elevate the comedy of a situation, something about the way they did it here really made the tone seem a bit off. Now that's not to say there's not entertainment to be had here. There definitely is. This movie had a lot of entertaining parts, but there's also a lot of padding and tonal inconsistency. Well, it's not really tonal inconsistency. The tone is pretty consistent from beginning to end. It's really that the tone doesn't really match the story. As I said, that can work at times, but this is like throughout, 100%. They keep this tone from beginning to end. And something about that just seemed off. It was just, you couldn't make up your mind as to what they wanted this movie to be. It seems like there's a whole bunch of setup to jokes in this movie, but never any payoff. Now, as stated before, there are some funny parts, but it's all due to the dry humor, the absurdity of all that's going on. But that seeming lack of payoff that they have in parts of this movie just made it fall a little bit short for me. This one's a bit of a slow starter. The first half of the movie takes a while to get going. Now, I understand why, because there's a lot of information they're trying to get to us. There's a lot of things they're trying to say and flesh out. But I couldn't help but feel like they could have tightened it up just a bit. There were a few times a bit closer to the middle that I started looking at my watch, wondering when things were going to pick up a bit. Now, thankfully, the second half of the movie picks up considerably, especially the final third. The entire final third of the movie is really fucking cool. Now, this is where the majority of the action happens, so that's probably one of the main reasons for that. And even though we are talking about Santa Claus, elves, the military, and a hitman squaring off in a bloody battle, all this action, much like everything else in the movie, is played very straight, so this action is pretty badass. And pretty jarringly bloody at times, too. Now, this is what really left me conflicted about the movie, because the second half is really entertaining, and the first half is really interesting, but it's just a bit too fucking slow. The movie's not particularly long at 1 hour and 40 minutes, but if they had taken about 10 minutes in that first half and just tightened it up a bit, I think it would have helped tremendously. Now that means we would probably lose some really funny gags, but at the expense of the movie, I think it would be worth it. Our performances as a whole are all actually really good. As I said, this movie's played very straight, so the performances are as well. Even the elves even play it pretty damn straight. There's a few absurd things about these characters, but none of it's played for straight laughs. It's all done straight, and everybody here does a really good job in the performance department. Mel Gibson is a depressed Santa Claus who feels pretty let down by the world because kids have stopped believing in him is great. And while he may be the star of the show, the one that really stole it all around would be Walton Goggins. The majority of the absurd moments that happen in this film involve Goggins, and his character is one of the most interesting that we get out of all. Not only is he this ruthless hitman who's been contracted by a 10-year-old boy, but he himself has his own reasons for wanting to take on this particular job. And pretty much any scene that he shows up in this movie is guaranteed to entertain. Overall, everybody here did a surprisingly good job with this ridiculous premise. From a technical standpoint, this movie looks great. The shots, editing, and overall look of the film are all very high quality and look great. But what really stood out to me was the effects, and the vast majority of these effects take place in the last third of the film. The big showdown of the movie is shot like a 1980s action flick. As far as I could tell, it was practical all the way. It is chock full of over-the-top squibs, huge explosions, and ridiculous amounts of blood splatter, all to the backdrop of a winter wonderland, and it looks amazing. I really enjoyed the end of this movie. It was an awesome time and totally took me back to that action heyday of the 80s with things like Commando and Rambo First Blood 2. At the end of the day, Fatman was an entertaining movie. It did fall a little bit short of what I expected due to that really oddly executed first half of the film. It is an interesting part of the movie, but it's not as entertaining as the rest of the movie. Overall though, we do have an interesting story with some really good performances, a great look, and some fantastic effects. So if the idea of Santa Claus dual-wielding pistols having a shootout with a guy with a fully automatic assault rifle with explosions going off all around them sounds good to you, then check out Fatman on streaming.
Across the street.
While I was a little bit disappointed by the first half of this film, overall, I did have a good time with it. And if this absurd little premise sounds good to you, and especially if you're a fan of like 80s over-the-top action, then check out Fatman, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. So there it is, guys, my review of Fatman. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, North Pole.
One horse open slur.
You think you're the first?
Oh, the fields will go.
Think I got this job because I'm fat and jolly?
If this movie teaches you anything, it is that we need more Walton Goggins. The guy is pretty great in everything he's in. He is typically the standout when he's in a movie. And I was really happy to see him get a more predominant role in this movie, and he totally sells it. He is absolutely the best part of this movie, and I loved every scene that he was in. He does that low-key, right under the surface, fucking crazy, insane motherfucker just right. And yes, I know that's kind of like his thing, that's what he usually plays, but hey, he plays it fucking great, so right on, man, keep the fuck going. It's kind of like Nicolas Cage if he just gave up on all the straight roles and went full-on crazy Cage all the fucking time. That's Walton Goggins in a nutshell, and how the fuck do you not want more of that?